2, 1.
It feels like Miami.
Miami, 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 Miami.
It feels like Miami.
Welcome to the Miami Heat podcast. I'm your host, Giancarlo Navas, and with me today is producer and co-founder Brian Goins. You can see him on the screen to the left.
What's up, guys?
How you doing, Brian? Daytime podcast
Good.
for us.
How are you doing? I'm
Out of the norm.
more concerned about you.
I may or may not have COVID. We don't know yet. I was exposed. I got one haircut in the last 4 months, and it just so happened that my barber texted and he's like, I'm sick and I tested positive. So who knows? It's been I'm on day 4 of quarantine. I don't have any symptoms. I have a little congestion. Is that bad, Nekias Duncan, our statistician at Pun Master? He's on the bottom of the screen. Is sniffles bad? I don't know. I feel good though.
Let's just hope for the best, I suppose.
Fingers crossed. Listen, I've
Go
locked
either
myself.
way. Could go either
I'm
way.
locked in my room. Haven't moved. I've just followed free agency news. You know, we're trying to keep family and people safe. I don't leave. I have everything I needed here. Let's get tested tomorrow. By the way, shout out to rapid testing here in Miami. It's a very good thing that we have here. Also with us today, very special guest. Been on the program before, and I think that this is as good a time as ever to have him. Albert Nahmad, welcome to the program again.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
You know, last
You
time
are
we had
the-
you on, we had you on right before Jimmy Butler did a sign and trade with the Heat. We went over that, and it was like perfect because that's exactly what happened. So, yeah, that's awesome.
The end of that trade got a little bit messy for a little while, but we got it done.
Oh yeah, I mean, every time you give up a first round pick, that always hurts.
I mean, no, the whole Goran debacle that,
Goran, right.
Goran getting traded to the Mavs, the not. Okay, so we have a lot to cover. Kind of a weird, crazy, unsexy offseason for the Heat. We're going to get into a lot of the minutia, but we have Albert on to kind of help us understand what the Heat did salary cap-wise because, their big summer in 2021, whale hunting, what they do in this offseason is really going to inform what they do in next offseason. So, Albert, I really want to start with, what's your take on the Meyers Leonard contract? Because a lot of people online, on Twitter, on Discord, on Reddit, everywhere, they're really kind of confused by the signing. And I went over a little bit last show, but we really want an expert's opinion on what the hell Andy Ellisberg and Pat Riley are thinking.
I mean, it was a little rich, but that's Heat culture, and that's what I'm thinking. I mean, he had the ability to give them money for a year with the team option on the second year, and it's a contract bred out of Heat culture. I mean, there's no way to describe it in a way that makes sense from a salary cap perspective, except to say that the Heat had the ability to provide it, and they did.
So I know that, just off the bat, when you sign a 1+1, that automatically kicks in a no trades clause, correct?
For a player who will have early bird or bird rights at the end of it, and Meyers Leonard is one, correct?
So I guess the question is, it's like, when the deal was first signed, I looked at it as well. I mean, that's a nice chunky contract to move, and that along with Iguodala and Kelly Olynyk's $12.5 million expiring and Andre's 15. Okay, yeah, you could start piecing together some salary, but then the no trade clause stuff. We were reminded of it. How likely do you think it is that the Heat talked to Meyers and said, hey, listen, we're going to give you this money. We're going to give you this $10 million or you're not going to get anywhere else. And, if we need to move you, we could ask you to waive the no trade clause. Is that something that you think is likely, possible? Because that was kind of that's where I pivoted once I realized that they just could not trade him willy-nilly.
Okay, so let's break it down. It's not really a 2-year, $20 million contract. It's really a 1-year, maybe $9.5 million contract, right? That's the way you have to think about it. So is it rich? Yes, but when you consider it's only a 1-year deal, players tend to get slightly higher salaries out of it, right? So that's one thing. It's still a little bit rich, but I don't think they did it with an intention to trade him. No, I don't. I don't think they did that for any of the players they gave a 1-year deal to. I think the intention is to stick with the team they've got. They could make trades with players who don't have those 1-year deals, but and By the way, any of the new guys, Avery, Bradley, Mo Harkless, they can be traded. They don't have the same issue because they will not be an early bird or a bird right player at the end of the season. But I don't think the intention was to sign those guys with an intention of trading them this year.
Do you
I
think
think that the big play is for next year.
My question, I think, would be, say the Heat wanted to go down. I don't think they're going to really do it, but if they needed to do a sign and trade next year for whatever reason, is that something where they could pick up his option next year and it kind of helps them?
Okay, so let's think about how that would work, right? So these contracts that have, where the player has veto power over any trade, that obviously pertains to the season, right? Once you exercise that option, and in this case, it's the Heat that has the option, that veto power falls away. So the question is, when can you exercise that option? Well, in most contracts, and I haven't gotten the contract yet because it hasn't been signed yet, but in most contracts, that's not until after the season. So in any trade for the 2021 regular season, call it at the trade deadline, they would have to agree to the trade. Now, at the end of the season, if they exercise the option, then they could use it in a trade for someone else, like you're saying. But let's think about how that would work timing-wise, because I've seen that written everywhere, and that's not necessarily something that would be possible anyway. You would have to exercise the option, obviously, in the window in which you have it, which would end at the end of the 2020-21 regular season. That's the equivalent of June 30th, whenever it is this time.
So that's before they have a meeting with Giannis.
So you can't have that meeting. So why are you going to exercise an option without knowing why you're doing it? Now, could something happen that's not legal? Sure. Could they have a conversation? I doubt that's going to happen. So it's going to get very tricky is the point. Now, what they could do is this. They could say, I have enough salary cap space to sign Giannis because I know how much he's making because I know what the max salary slot is. And then I know what my team's salary is, so I know how much I'll have left over. And then I can exercise one of those options into the space that's left over. Now, why would I do that? One, either I like the player, or two, I have an intention of using that salary to trade for more. So that's the way they would probably approach it if they did that.
It was
very
kind of
unlikely. It's very unlikely. It seems like what they would do is they would just decline, or in order to decline a team option, what does the team have to do? You just put in paperwork?
No, you do nothing. You just let it go.
Nice. I like that.
It's
I guess you
the
just and then you
action of
renounce everybody
exercising.
else.
The action of exercising is what exercises it. The absence of an exercise means you've declined it by default.
Gotcha.
So like a lot, we were scratching our heads, and we're not Albert, right? So we're just trying to figure out how, well Pat and Andy know what they're doing, right? So who are we lowly analysts to doubt? Nekias, I was thinking about it. I saw some people really thought it was a basketball move. I'm kind of with Albert that judging from just like the salary cap stuff and everything, like it seems just to be you're doing right by a guy who you really appreciate it. I mean, Nekias, Meyers and Bam on the court last year, they were really good. 7.2 net rating, 114, almost 115 offensive rating, 107 D rating. Not the best, but survived. I think that they're gonna want to play Bam next to a big, at least to start. I don't know how you feel about Mo Harkless as a starter, Nekias, but I mean I'm sure that he'll get a little bit of playing time, judging from the way this roster looks.
Yeah, I think we're going to see Mo Harkless get a good bit of time at the 4 this year. As you mentioned, Meyers and Bam did play well together. The timing of the Meyers signing is what kind of threw me off more than anything. It was a little bit of a surprise, but not a surprise that he came back. I mean, Meyers loves Miami. He's obviously a vocal leader in that locker room. During the regular season, at least, provided some spacing, provided a big body defensively. Communication on the defensive end, so there was a fit there, but the timing kind of threw me off because it was basically as soon as free agency started, and I just kind of wonder what the talks were with Jay Crowder at that point, because it seems like bringing Meyers back, especially if you think he's going to be in the rotation, it means that you're sliding Bam back to the 4 at least in the regular season for the starting lineup. And if you're slotting Bam as the 4 there, you kind of already have to have an inkling that Jay Crowder is getting years offered elsewhere, and you kind of have doubts that he won't be brought back.
Yeah, but let's look at what Jay Crowder actually got, because he got it.
Maybe they do early.
Yeah, I think we gotta look at what Jay Crowder actually got, because he got 3 years, $30 million, The Heat at one point were basically offering him 1 year 14, but had they not signed Meyers, they would have been still, what, 9 plus 14, over 25 million, still below the tax line. So they could have given him like a $20 million deal for 1 year.
The point is actually a very good one, a very astute one, because what they lost by offering him that contract so early was the ability to retain Jay Crowder and utilize the full mid-level exception. They automatically lost that as soon as they agreed to this contract with Meyers Leonard, right? So if they gave the 14 and, Avery Bradley took 5.6, but if it was the full mid-level 9.3, you'd have enough room below the tax to do all of that. And as soon as they offered that contract to Meyers Leonard, it was gone. So they lost that flexibility if that was their intention. So, but clearly it wasn't, right? They had the backup plan of Avery Bradley if Jay Crowder didn't accept this contract, and ultimately he didn't.
I mean, they signed him within minutes of free agency start, so he had to be a priority for them. It seemed like.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first priority was to keep Jay Crowder. Jay Crowder apparently was very nice about how he handled it. So good stand-up guy there, but he got more money. So it was a situation where you can't fault the man for taking more money.
Albert, can you explain why they lost the ability to give the full mid-level exception when they signed Meyers Leonard?
So technically they didn't, but from a realistic standpoint, they didn't want to cross the luxury tax line, right? So if you've got, 14 going out to Jay Crowder possibly, plus another 9 going out to the mid-level exception guy, that's 23, plus another 9 going out to Meyers Leonard, that'll take you over the tax line. It's just too much salary. It's not that they technically couldn't do all 3. It's just too much salary. So by giving Meyers 9, it sort of hampered. It sort of made it so that if Jay Crowder accepted his contract, then that's really all you had left, as opposed to being able to give the full mid-level exception as well. I mean, you can think of Meyers Leonard's contract as a replacement for full mid-level, right? He's making just about the same money.
So to kind of give people an understanding, the salary cap this year is set at around $109 million, and the luxury tax is at $133 million. Now we're going to get into this later, but the hard cap is at $139 million, which is $6 million over the tax line. Albert, the other thing I want to ask, which I've been I learned of this week. So the Heat did something kind of interesting where they signed Mo Harkless to about $3.6 million, which looked at the time to be their biannual exception. And then it turned out that they ended up splitting the MLE. Am I correct? Or I guess what you're huh?
You're correct. So, I mean, I guess for a lot of people, it looked like the biannual exception, but if you know how the cap works, you should have never locked yourself into that thinking, right? Because if the biannual exception is $3 million or $3.6 million and the full mid-level is $9.3 million, then what you're saying to yourself is because they spent 3.6, it has to be the biannual. But no, it doesn't. It could be just a small portion of the full mid-level exception. And the Heat retain the flexibility to do either one now. So when they were signing that contract, they didn't know which one it would be. They gave the amount of money that it could be either one, right? Once they were locked into not using the full mid-level exception, then they just slotted into the mid-level and gave the difference to Avery Bradley. So the full 9.3 was split between the two players.
They were hedging.
Yeah, I mean, hedging is not the greatest word. It would be retaining flexibility would be a better one. If they wanted to use the full mid-level, then they could. They still could do that. They could give both the full mid-level of 9.3 and the 3.6 of the biannual. Ultimately, they didn't do that because Avery Bradley only took 5.6. If it was another player at the full mid-level, then they had that flexibility. And now by retaining it, they can still use the biannual both this year or next year if they're an over the cap team next year.
So I want that part kind of explained to the audience a little bit because I was trying to understand. So next season, because they did not use the biannual, because they split that, they're gonna have the biannual for either a buyout guy or if somebody else kind of trickles out of free agency this season. If they don't use it,
so the biannual exception, first of all, as it's named, is only available once every 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So if you use it this year, it's automatically gone next year. So by not using it this year so far, they retain the flexibility to use it either this year. They could still use it. They have 15 players, but they're $7.5 million below the salary cap, or below the luxury tax. And if they find a player that they really like, they can use it this year. If they don't use it this year, then they have it available for next year. And that's the flexibility it gives them. Now, if they use cap room next year, and we all hope that we get Giannis, and that would require a cap room, and then the biennial exception would be gone. Like every other exception, it goes away if you use cap room. But that's not guaranteed. So they retain the flexibility to use it in case they remain over the cap next year.
Didn't they technically use cap room to sign Goran and Meyers, or is that just because it's bird rights that doesn't work?
No, they stayed over the cap. They didn't use cap room this summer. If they had, they would have lost
because of Goran's cap hold.
Yeah, because they didn't renounce the rights.
They didn't renounce anybody's rights. They stayed over the salary cap the entire time. They had bird rights.
See, I follow Albert's work.
Albert, I called it fake ass cap space all season because Goran's $28 million cap hold and they had about 22 in space. So I was just telling people this is fake ass cap space. They don't really
in practical space, but that's only if they renounce their rights.
So I had a different perspective, right? I mean, if Goran Dragic had gone somewhere else, and obviously he never had that intention because he signed the moment free agency started. But if he had,
lifer, Albert, he lifer.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. But if he had gone somewhere else, then everybody would have changed course and they said, of course they're going to use cap room now because who else is remaining? Jay Crowder? Would you rather sign Jay Crowder or get $22 million of cap space? Everybody would. Well, you could sign Jay Crowder into that 22 and still have some left. That's the point. So anyway, it doesn't matter.
That's actually interesting. We were operating the whole time under the assumption that Goran, there was just no chance. I mean, I think we're reporting at locally with the papers and 5 Reasons Sports and all that. I mean, I think it was pretty clear that Goran had intended to stay.
I mean, all those billboards basically.
It was absolutely clear that he intended to stay, but we were being a little bit too casual by saying they absolutely wouldn't use cap room because if he had gone, then the narrative would have shifted and most people probably would have said, okay, cap room's a possibility now. So what you were saying when you were saying they'd stay over the cap without realizing it is you're saying Goran Dragic is definitely staying. And I think that was a fair assumption. So that's why everybody was so definitive about it.
I agree.
So Albert, some people on our Discord server, which by the way, if you are interested in getting in on the action on our Miami Heat Beat Discord server, we have a link in the description. Ask us on Twitter if you can't find it. I mean, it's a lot of fun. We're talking all the time, especially now in free agency. I'm in there, Brian's in there, even some Heat Beat alumni are in there. Leif is in there. Get in on the action. It's a lot of fun. So we also have some AMAs. So when we have guests on, we give our listeners the opportunity to ask some guests questions that they want to know. So Fidel on our Discord server is asking if you can maybe explain a little bit about the trade exception. How do you get it? When does it expire? And how can you use it? And can you combine it, with other players' salaries? So that's something I actually learned that you couldn't do this offseason. Can you use it to trade for players when you are already over the cap like the Heat can?
Okay, let's break that question down because there's multiple questions.
There's a lot, yeah. Multi-pronged.
The first is how you get it. How you get it is simple. If you trade away one player and take back less salary in return, the difference in salaries becomes your trade exception. So if I trade away a player making $10 million and I take back $5 million in salary in return, that could be one player or many, then the difference between that 10 and 5 becomes a trade exception. You've got a $5 million trade exception. So hopefully that part's clear. Now, let's say I have a trade exception. In the Heat's case, it's $7.5 million. So let's use that. From the moment of the trade, you have 1 year to use it. It's a little bit messed up this year because of the shortened season. It's a little bit less than that now, but you have 1 year to use it, and you can use it to acquire someone in trade without taking back matching salary. So, for example, because the Heat have $7.5 million trade exception at this very moment, and by the way, they're about $7.5 million below the luxury tax line. It's amazing how that worked out.
Andy Ellisberg, baby.
They could go out and find a player on any other team that's making up to $7.5 million and trade for him without sending back any salary in return. So that's
you need to create a roster spot though. You would need
that's
to
something that could come.
Chris Silva.
I was thinking that because the Heat technically are still under the luxury tax where they can cut Chris Silva without obviously having like stretch his salary. You could just take the cap hit this year, right?
Absolutely. Because they're $7.5 million below the luxury tax line, they can just waive a player. If it's Chris Silva, then it's Chris Silva, and still utilize the extra $7.5 million below the luxury tax, however they want to. So they have that flexibility this year because they didn't go right up to the tax line.
Now I have a question on top of that because obviously like this year is gonna be weird in terms of like just the BMI for like what's it called? Where is it where the league has like they like negotiate the players' salaries where it's like 50%. and all that stuff.
BRI,
'Cause I know,
the split of BRI?
yeah, BRI. So I saw a post, I think from Eric Pincus, where like Golden State, for example, they use their trade exception in order to bring in Kelly Oubre, but obviously like their luxury tax hit might be declined because of the whole weird season of just the salary shortage, and I think it was like a 20 or 30% decline in the luxury tax possibility.
Right.
So if the Heat were over maybe like $1 million or $2 million, is that something that could help them bring them under the luxury tax if they needed to?
So actually, the Golden State situation was a pretty good example of how trade exceptions work. Last year, they sent out Iguodala and took nothing back in return, and he was making $17 million. So 17 million out, 0 in equals a $17 million trade exception. They have up to a year to use it, and they used it. They're going to use it when it becomes official on Kelly Oubre. Kelly Oubre makes 14, so he fits within that trade exception. Now, what you're talking about is they're a very expensive team to begin with, right? So adding them in makes them more expensive, and that's going to yield to a massive luxury tax bill. But because BRI, essentially the league's revenues is declining this year, fans can't be in attendance, and that's going to take away maybe 25, 30% of the league's revenue, call it 25. They will lower the tax bill by that 25%. So when you see people saying they're going to pay X amount of dollars in luxury tax, it will get declined. Nobody knows yet how much, because it will depend upon how much revenues decline from what they were expecting them to be. And they were expecting the league to generate about $8.5 billion of revenue this year.
Albert, you are as kind and as gracious and as knowledgeable about this stuff as anybody. How do you feel when you see people just willy-nilly speak with authority like they know something about the cap and they're just blatantly wrong? Because I feel like that happens on Twitter every day. And I just imagine you kind of face-palming and shaking your head and like, oh, these kids.
Yeah, I mean, people tell me I'm wrong all the time. And
wait, what? People tell you that you're wrong?
Yeah, people on Twitter, they just say this is wrong, that's wrong, the other thing is wrong. I would prefer they ask me a question as opposed to declaring I'm wrong, because I will gladly explain to them the logic. But it is what it is. It's the Twitter world, right? So I might be able to. Oh my
goodness! How dare they say you're wrong? Albert, you are the authority on the salary cap. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's you and Andy. That's it. You and Andy Ellisberg.
Definitely not Milwaukee's GM right now.
Albert, I don't know. I'm sure that you've seen the stuff with the Bucks and how they handled their salary cap. I mean, that feels a bit mind-boggling to me, kind of how that got fumbled. Is that something that's common in the league? I mean, that just feels a little bit, I don't know, maybe we're just paying extra attention to it because of Giannis, but it just feels like pretty insane how all these stories are coming out about how they just have completely fumbled their salary cap.
So I would hope doesn't permeate the entire league, because what they've done, you never know what's happening behind the scenes, but this is pretty cut and dry. Right, they've made what I would classify as significant mistakes in the last two summers. Last summer, I pointed to a possibility where they could generate a $10 million trade exception if they just made some minor changes to the contracts they structured, and they chose not to do so. And I mentioned it, and then it doesn't matter. Then they defended their actions in a way which it was transparent, right? You could see they have to defend their action because they don't want to admit to a mistake, but that was last summer. This summer, they basically signed one of their players who had early bird rights, Pat Connaughton, to a contract that used his non-bird rights. His early bird rights. Sorry, that's a big difference. And his early bird rights require you to have at least a 2-year deal. And they agreed to sign him to a 1-year deal with a player option. Can't do that. That's a violation of the cap rules. Now, that is as easy a cap rule as you'll get in the NBA. So I can't imagine how they did it, how they overlooked that. So he was going to have a $4 million starting salary with a player option for the second year. Once they found out that was not possible, they had to give him $5 million, an extra $1 million in this year to make it a 3-year deal with an option at the end of the third year. And that extra $1 million really has damaging impacts on their salary cap position because they're so close to the hard cap. So it had a real material difference. And not only that, once they made that mistake, they corrected it by giving him more money. They didn't have to do that. They could have structured the acquisition, which required them to be hard capped, as a sign and trade rather than doing it into the non-taxable level exception, and avoided that. Now, all of this is very confusing, I know, but yes, these mistakes are very unexpected, let's call it, for an actual NBA basketball team.
I just really wanted to ask because I think oftentimes, especially with this kind of offseason where it feels like a lot of lateral moves for the Heat, people are kind of on Twitter complaining about Pat and Andy and the organization and everything. And I just kind of really want people to understand that, look at the other good teams in the league and what they're doing and how, I think how fortunate the Heat fans are because they have such a good front office, very on top of the cap. And I know people get on the Heat for those 4-year deals a couple years ago. I mean, that's probably one of the few mistakes that this franchise has really made in that kind of sense. So I really wanted Albert to articulate why, Heat fans should be really thankful, and they should, not saying that you can't be critical of the team online or anything, but, kind of be thankful. And part of the reason why we had Albert on is because there is a vision in what they're doing, right? And Albert, I think you'd agree. I think that they're, while this wasn't a very sexy offseason where they're getting Danilo Gallinari and Paul Millsap and Wes Matthews, all this stuff, re-signing Jay Crowder and Goran Dragic, and like they're gunning for the championship. I thought that they really positioned themselves really smartly salary cap wise. They remained flexible. They retained their pretty enticing trade assets. And I think for 2021, which has always been the plan, they're as well positioned as ever.
I would agree with that. During this past regular season, everybody was talking about the possibility of getting Giannis next summer, right? And then this offseason happened, and Milwaukee started making their moves, and they got a couple of guys. Well, in theory, they thought they had a couple of guys. They thought they had Drew Holiday and Bogdanovic. But that part fell apart. Yeah. And
as we record, Bogdanovic accepted his offer sheet with the Hawks, by the way.
Yeah, so they still got 2 days to match. So that just means that he's going to Atlanta or Sacramento if Sacramento matches, but nowhere else. But all of a sudden they're making these moves and everybody's starting to get a little bit nervous that Giannis is going to sign his contract. All these reports come out saying Giannis is going to sign his max extension and it's going to be offered. Obviously, it's probably already offered. It could be offered at noon today. Giannis was going to sign and our plan was over. What should we do? Right? The Heat remained disciplined through all of that. Now, I've always been of the impression that he would not sign his extension because he had very little incentive to do so. The Heat remained disciplined through all of that. Now we're in a position where we will have the maximum cap space next summer to sign him. So you can't fault the Heat for doing exactly what we wanted them to do throughout the entire season, right? They're in this position now where they have wonderful flexibility for next summer.
I saw on Twitter that somebody said that, we got mad at the Heat for giving a bunch of multi-year deals back then, and now we're mad that they did it, and we really need to decide what we want them to do. All right, Albert, I know you got to go. Last thing before we get you out, a little bit on the Bam extension, because I feel like no news is good news at this point for both Giannis and Bam with their extensions for the Heat.
Yeah, and talk. You were mentioning how Giannis doesn't have an incentive to sign it right now. Explain more about that.
Okay. So Giannis is going to get the same money, right? The same exact money. Well, if he signs the extension with Milwaukee, he could either sign it this summer or next summer, and it's the exact same amount of money, right? It all starts in 2021, and it's the exact same contract. So why would a player who has the ability to sign the exact same contract next summer and give himself another year to evaluate his team, lock himself in this year when he could just do it next year? That was my thinking. Right? The only reason why you would lock that money in is because of injury concerns, right? But short of being concerned about injury, you wouldn't want to lock yourself into a contract this season with a team that you don't know if you want to be with over the long term. If they have another bad season next year, then he might want to leave. So why lock him into that contract now? His contract, by the way, the Supermax contract with Milwaukee would be 5 years and $228 million at the current cap projection for next year, $112 million. With any other team, it would be 145, so that's a lot less. But that's also misleading because it's not with the Milwaukee. Obviously, he'd sign a 5-year contract worth $228 million. With any other team, he'd probably sign a 2-year contract and opt out, and then get the max when he gets to be a 10-year veteran. Your max salary goes higher as a 10-year veteran. it goes to 35% of the salary cap, as opposed to if he signs next summer, it's only 30. So he could get over those same 5 years with any other team about 205, 206, 207 million. So you compare that to 228, it's not that much different. So I'm casually ignoring 20 million bucks. 20 million bucks, but it's not the dramatic difference that we're seeing all over the news, right? So why would he sign a contract this summer when he can sign the exact same one next summer and have the ability to evaluate whether he wants to even be with the Bucks? So the fact that he hasn't signed that extension doesn't mean he's going to leave Milwaukee. He could wait. If they win the title this year, it could very easily be signed. But if they get bounced in the first round of the playoffs, second round of the playoffs, the third round, whatever it is, I don't know what he's thinking. If they get bounced early, let's call it in the playoffs, without reaching the finals like they did last year, then maybe he says to himself, you know what, if I'm on this team, I have a better shot, whether that team is Dallas or Miami or whomever. That's sort of where the Heat is. That's why the Heat is retaining this flexibility. That's why Dallas made all the trades they did this summer to be able to have max room for him next summer. So people are lining up for the possibility that he does not want to sign his extension this summer. They're betting on that already. And
so on your way out, a little bit on the Bam stuff, because his extension is a big piece of this.
Yeah, so Bam's eligible for an extension right now. It could be he could either sign it right now or sign the exact same contract as a free agent next summer. So it's going to be 25% of the salary cap. It could be increased to 30% if he reaches all NBA first, second, or third team, however they want to structure it. But the point is, you either sign the extension right now or you sign it next summer. Same exact money. Now, a player in Bam's shoes would want to sign it right now, because if the same exact money, and he's going to be a restricted free agent next year, which means he can't go anywhere else, most likely. And he probably wouldn't want to. He loves Miami. Sign it now, because if I get injured, then I might lose that money, is the thinking. But if he does that, the Heat loses anywhere between $13 and $17 million of cap room next summer. And all of a sudden, you don't have max cap space for Giannis or anybody else. So picture it right now. Right now, we have enough cap room for a max contract next summer with anywhere between nothing and $9 million left to spare after it. So that's Giannis plus anywhere up to $9 million. That's what we're looking at now. If Bam Adebayo signs that extension right now, it's gone. No Giannis, unless we do a trade to get him, a sign and trade to get him. So that's the difference. He takes his money now, or he takes the money next summer. If he takes it now, he gets the exact same money as he would have next summer, but we lose the ability to sign a max contract next summer. He takes it next summer instead, he gets the exact same money, but we have the ability to sign that max contract.
What do you make of them having the same agent, and them kind of, Giannis and Bam have the same agent, so, no extension? What do you make of the people that read into the agent, is the agent aspect of this?
The agent aspect of it is real. The relationship with the Heat organization is real. I mean, this is what the Heat culture is all about, right? So you make that little sacrifice in terms of not.
But I meant from the extension standpoint. I mean, from like Bam, Bam's agent not pushing for the extension because he might feel like his client, would not be able to get his way.
I'm sure he is pushing for it. This is all a relationship situation, right? I'm sure his agent is pushing for that extension, but he understands the Heat's predicament, and they've had a discussion. Look, the big downside for Bam is he could get injured, right? That's a huge risk. So he'll get insurance to cover that possibility, and then he'll be protected in that way, hopefully. Beyond that, there's no downside to Bam waiting, except for the fact he doesn't get to lock in his money right now. And who knows, there's risk. But he understands that the Heat predicament is real, and that he could be playing with Giannis next summer, and I think he'll push it back. There's no guarantee, right?
Yeah.
The Heat, it could be guys
or Kawhi or Paul George. It's quite bountiful free agency.
I'm not in love. I mean, yes, with all the other options, Kawhi's a big option for me. I'm not in love as much with the Paul George possibility, but that's
me neither.
You could have your opinion on.
I don't think anybody is.
Yeah.
Playoff P.
Albert, you are the best. Thank you so much for joining us. You are so generous with your time. I know you want to watch the Dolphins, and you have a beautiful Sunday to get to. We appreciate all the time, always. You are a blessing to not just Heat Twitter, but to all of NBA Twitter. As kind as they come, as knowledgeable as they come. Albert Nahmad, where can people follow your work?
Thank you, guys.
Give your Twitter handle on the way out for the people.
Oh,
Do you have anything to plug too?
You have anything to
my
plug?
Twitter handle is @Albert Nahmad, Albert Nahmad.
Okay.
My website, which I haven't written on in forever, is heathoops.com. Nothing else to plug, really.
You're the best, sir. Take care. Enjoy your Sunday. Enjoy your weekend, and stay healthy.
Go
All
Fins.
right, thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Albert. That was Albert Nahmad joining us today. Now we're gonna pivot a little bit to kind of some X's and O's stuff with Nekias, right? So we have one of the premier basketball minds, covering the NBA. And Nekias, I wanted to talk a little bit about this Avery Bradley and Mo Harkless business. Avery solves their point of attack defensive issues. However, dude can't do much else. It's kind of weird. I don't hate the fit. It's as good as they could have done given the circumstances, but I don't know. Hard to be excited.
Yeah, it's important not to conflate Avery Bradley feeling a legitimate need and Avery Bradley being good, because I don't think he's particularly good at basketball overall. Like he's a fine shooter. Doesn't do much else. Not really a plus passer. Not a great finisher. But again,
But he does the one thing that the Heat need really well, right?
correct? The one thing Miami needed was a point of attack defender, and there were maybe two guys on the market that were better at that skill than Avery Bradley, and Avery Bradley was the unrestricted option that the Heat went for.
Who are the other two?
I would probably say Chris Dunn, who took a deal with Atlanta, though he's much worse offensively than Avery Bradley is, which is hard to do. So it's understandable that the Heat didn't want to cramp their spacing that way.
Plus, he's
other
signed for
guy-
more years too.
Yeah. Other guy, Gary Payton the second is still out there. He's a fringe NBA talent, but the one thing he does is defend guards at an extremely high level. So if the Heat wanted to take a flyer, they could have done that. But they go with the proven guy in Avery Bradley. Played an important role on a title team before opting to get out of the bubble. So again, can shoot a little bit off movement, can defend point guards. That's all Miami really needs him to do. So the fit is obvious there. I would assume that he starts, kind of be your spot starter, 18 to 24 minutes, somewhere in that range.
Really?
Could close out some games depending on the matchup. Yeah,
What'd
just
that
depending
lineup
on
look
who.
like?
If you're facing, you would go Bradley, I guess Bradley, Hero, Robinson, Butler, Bam. If you want to go Butler at the 4, that option's available. You can go with Bradley, one of Hero or Robinson, and get a little bit more switchable if you want to throw Mo Harkless in there if he has the jumper going, Andre Iguodala if he has the jumper going. The optionality is there.
I'm not sure Hero starts. I know that a lot of people have thrown that around, but I think just Bradley, Duncan, Jimmy, Bam, and Meyers, or Bam and Harkless makes the most sense. I don't know if they're going to be in a rush to start Hero. I understand kind of the appeal of it, but I just think from a lineup perspective, I think it makes more sense to start Bradley.
Yeah, I think Bradley starts. I think the real question becomes Hero versus Robinson. So I guess if you're looking at it within that lens, then it depends on what the Heat prioritize. If it's the movement shooting and what Bam and Duncan Robinson does and dribble handoff and how that opens up things for everyone else, then sure. But again, Avery Bradley isn't a guy that's going to be breaking down guys in isolation or running pick and rolls for you. So if you do need someone to spell Jimmy Butler those ball handling opportunities, then I think Hero slots as a fit there. So it's really just going to depend on what the Heat prioritize in terms of the offensive fit there.
How do you feel about Bradley shooting on the move? Because Miami has their shooters flying off that pistol action. They really love the handoff stuff. Shooters coming off of that. How do you like Bradley in those kinds of sets that Spo's in love with?
Like, he's fine with it. I think he's going to be a guy that flies off some pin downs. He's going to be pin downs and spot ups, I think. But he's been doing that basically his entire career. He was thriving off of similar actions back in Boston when he was there, just coming off of those screen actions. So I think the comfort is going to be there. Obviously you're not going to be running your offense to Avery Bradley or anything like that. He's not going to be the primary screen guy. But if you're just looking for a guy that can knock down some open shots for you, he can do that.
Do you think he has more appeal than none starting at this point? Is that what you're basically going for?
I think you know how we feel about
Yeah.
none.
Yeah, I just don't see none improving enough defensively to make it worth it, because I think none gives you that off the dribble shooting. He did grow as a passer throughout the regular season. It was infuriating watching him that first month. He was making shots, but he was missing a lot of reads. But he finally started making those reads right as the season got shut down. So if you believe he bounces back to the regular season form, which I think I think there's gonna be some positive progression there. He's not the guy that we saw in the bubble. Then you can make the argument that you just run back the starting lineup from last year. But the defense that Avery Bradley provides, I think it's just night and day between him and Nunn. And I think the Heat want to shore that up. So I wouldn't anticipate Nunn getting that spot. I would be surprised if Nunn is on the Heat roster when the season starts, honestly.
Honestly, like, yeah, I mean, we didn't get to ask Albert this, but, like, you know, I imagine that, and this might be a question for Leif next time he comes on, but, like, you know, what the Heat are looking at with Kelly and Kendrick Nunn, kind of, you know, that's a decent, that's probably their most popular trade machine package, and kind of seeing what they can get. And also you consolidate that roster spot.
Yeah, it seems like they really need to consolidate this roster again. Like, we had this issue a couple of years ago when they had all those guards.
Tyler Johnson.
I kind of feel like they have a lot of wings now that they probably want to give some playing time. Like KZ, you signed to a 3-year deal. He didn't play last year much. You kind of want to see what you got with him this year before, I guess, they have a decision to make next year with him.
Guys, I see a lot of people talking about KZ as a 4. I mean, obviously we haven't seen him play that much, but, like, I've always, man, he looks like the prototypical 3 for them. I don't think he's big enough to guard 4s.
He should be taking DJJ's spot now.
Yeah, I guess the argument for KZ at the 4 is that he's just as thin as Derrick Jones Jr. was, and he's probably a little bit longer. So I guess if you just want to have that switchable guy, or the guy just kind of hounding the passing lanes, or if they want to run some zone off the bench, remember the Sacramento game from KZ last year, you could just toss him at the top of your zone. Then that's how you do it. I mean, offensively, he's just going to be a spot up and attacker closeout type guy. So I think he works as a 4 in spurts. Just in general, like, you can't carve out 16, 18 minutes for him. I mean, he's just way too thin. Even if you believe in the ball skills and the shooting, like, he just won't survive defensively if you're playing him at the 4.
It seems like he's added a lot of muscle since we last saw him. We didn't even get to see him in the bubble at all. He didn't even play like any of those, like, scrimmages games. So I want to see him now. Like, I guess there will be a preseason, so I guess maybe we'll get to see a little bit of what he's done over the last year since we last saw him. But I imagine he's probably bigger than he was at that Sacramento game.
Yeah, the body just needs a lot of work. And then the other about him playing the 4, I mean, the Heat just drafted Precious. I would imagine that he's going to get time at the 4. And if we don't see a trade with Olynyk and Nunn, at least early on, then Olynyk's your backup 5, and having Precious kind of as the guy that can roam as a help side defender, or, you know, operate as the pick and roll guy while Kelly pops. I think there's a natural fit there. So I think you kind of pigeonholing KZ as the backup 3 if he's going to get minutes at all.
I've seen a lot of people talk about Precious being the backup 5, and I've really pivoted on that, and I'm just like, I think that he's a power forward, and I think that he look at him as a Jeremy Grant type guy, you know, a guy that can defend. You could switch. He's 6'9" and he has a wingspan, but I don't know if he's gonna have that. I mean, I know Bam's about that size too, but Bam has a different kind of build than Precious.
I mean, if you look at the depth chart, we don't really have a natural 4. I don't think
they really don't. I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, but that's fine. I mean, I think with the way that they play and everything. I mean, I think Harkless fits in really nicely there.
He could
at the 4, Nekias.
Yeah, I think Harkless is probably going to get some burn at the 4. I think
most of it.
Yeah, I guess he kind of has to be that guy. Like I said, if they're starting Meyers, Bam is your starting 4, and if you're calling Bam your 4, I think the 4 position is solidified there. But Harkless is a guy that's going to operate as the 4 offensively, again, going to spot up. Defensively, he seems like a guy, he's more comfortable defending 3s than he is with 4s, but he can hang with some 4s. So he's more tweener than 4, I feel, but he's going to slide into those minutes because the Heat just don't have many other options there.
I saw a clip of him locking down James Harden. That's pretty nice. I didn't even know he could do that.
Yeah,
well, I mean, I kind of get worried about him defending 4s, Nekias, because that's something that I think at least Jay Crowder did really. I thought Jay Crowder kind of struggled against smaller, quicker guys, but against bigger, stronger guys, you know, he was able to kind of maintain. He was really sound positionally. Obviously, you know, didn't have the foot speed to keep up with guys like Luka and Trey and stuff like that on those switches. But I thought, really good help guy, positionally strong.
We didn't even think about Iggy, but couldn't Iggy play the 4 a little bit? And he played 5 in
No,
the playoffs.
no more of that. I'm done with Andre playing big positions. God, no. I want that yeeted into the sun. I've had enough. I had enough of Andre defending Anthony Davis. I don't need to see that anymore. I know how that works.
Against
You're laughing, but they did that in the finals.
But I mean, they did it against Giannis, and it seemed to work. So I
They
mean,
didn't
you lost
play
Jay
Andre to
Crowder.
five that off. That was
they
Jay. It was
they
the
played
wall.
Jay the most against Giannis. That's actually
Well, I mean, it's easy when Eric Bledsoe is just allergic to hitting open threes. I mean, life's easy that way.
is Drew Holiday that much better?
Yeah, Drew's,
Yes, he is. Yes, absolutely.
We'll
Drew
see.
raises their ceiling, Nekias, in a way. Like I think that obviously, they lost some depth, but I think people are like way too in love with Dante DiVincenzo and George Hill. George Hill's a really good player who I would like here.
George Hill's not on that roster anymore.
I know, that's what I'm saying. That people were in love with them. Oh my God, the Bucks lost Dante DiVincenzo and
He's
George
still there.
Hill.
I mean, he's
When,
still there. Dante's still there.
Dante. Oh, that's right. Dante is still there. They didn't do the sign and trade for Bogdanovich.
Yep.
I mean, they're clearly better this year. I saw.
They added 2 pieces today. If you want to guys talk about it, I think they added the guy
Bryn
from the
Forbes
Spurs,
and-
Bryn Forbes, and they added somebody else. I can't remember.
The Forbes
Bryn
Forbes
Forbes
deal
and
was
Torrey
really
Craig.
nice for them.
Oh yeah, they added
really
Torrey
like
Craig
that.
from Denver.
That one's great. I mean, I think that they're better than they were last year. I don't even think that's a question. I think Drew makes them better. Nekias, I feel like the Heat went. I don't think they got better. I don't think they got worse. I kind of think they stayed the same. I think the upside of Jay Crowder is just higher than the upside of Mo Harkless, just because I think, you trust his jumper a little more. Mo Harkless has a really shaky jump shot. It's been good some years. It's been bad some years. Not a lot of volume. Never shot more than 3 threes a game. You're imagining that he's going to have a career year in terms of attempts from 3 with the Heat, the Spo offense. But if anything, it's a lateral move. At best, I think you're slightly better. Kind of curious how you feel.
I think the Heat are slightly better. Just as we're talking about fan bases overreacting or overrating or underrating moves, I feel like Meyers Leonard has his limitations, and he looked capital B bad in the bubble. Like there's no need to parse words there. But also we have to be careful about taking the recency bias at play and like an 8 or 10 game sample of Meyers versus like the 40 or 50 games we saw in the regular season. Like he was a fine spot starter for Miami, and I think he's more that guy than he is the guy that we saw in the bubble. That he got shut down due to injuries. Then Miami completely changed their rotation and the schemes they wanted to run. So he really had no. Not only did he have a huge layoff, he also didn't have room to get back into rhythm because the playing time just wasn't there once he did get healthy. So there was just a lot of weirdness going on, and I think it's important not to think that that's just who he is. It was a bad stretch, and it's fine to acknowledge that the stretch was bad. But I think once you get whatever semblance of a training camp we have, I think he's more of what we saw in the regular season, which is a guy who probably still doesn't shoot enough, but a guy that can shoot, a guy that boxes out and helps your team rebound, a guy that calls out sets on the defensive end, a guy that sets good screens for Miami's dribble handoff actions, can operate as a pick and pop guy and pick and roll. So I think he is a useful player. So if he's sliding back into the regular season, I don't think that he's sliding back into the starting lineup for the regular season at least. Like I think that's fine. The challenge is replacing the volume that Jay Crowder had offensively, because I don't think he was the 45% from 3 guy that we saw once he first got to Miami and through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. But even if you acknowledge that he's a 35, 36% 3-point shooter in a vacuum, he also took a lot of attempts. So the onus is going to be on Meyers Leonard to take more threes if he's back in the starting lineup. If Mo Harkless is going to slide into that spot starter role at the 4, even if it's for 18, 20 minutes, he has to take more than 3 attempts. Like, it has to go up to 5 or 6, and then you kind of live with that. Because I think defenses treat Jay Crowder and treat Mo Harkless the same. It's a soft closeout, or you just ignore them to muck up other actions. So the quality of looks, I think, are going to be equal. What separates Jay, he's a slightly better shooter, but he takes enough to where it matters at the end of the day. Mo Harkless hasn't been that guy. So it's between Harkless and Leonard, one of those two has to really commit to taking more threes. And then you just kind of live with it from there.
Or we just get dunking like 23s a game, right?
Correct.
That's the stuff I'm worried about. And I think, by the way, like I don't have the numbers in front of me, but like Jay Crowder was really good at finishing with the Heat this year. I remember looking, it was like, I think near 70% at the rim. Something crazy. I mean, part of that is, the dude's rolling off a wide open fucking closeout or something, right? But, I thought, especially in the playoffs, I thought some of those finishes, when they needed it, kind of was able to slide by defenders, avoid charges, kind of get those kind of tough finishes, has really good hands. He's a big guy, really strong at the rim. Not that he's, finishing through contact or anything, but, if he gets pushed a little bit on the way up, he's good. It's certainly a loss, and it's pretty... it hurts because, we talked about it with Albert, that money, we would have hoped that, Jay Crowder could have kind of got the money that Meyers got, and you kind of pivot to their small switchy lineups. Mm-hmm. So it sucks. Kind of wondering, Nekias, do you feel like we're going to see more of some more drop defense in the regular season with some zone, and then once they get to the playoffs when the rotation gets cut, we're going to Bam at the 5. We're going to more switching. We're going right. Like I think when Meyers and Kelly are in the game, you're kind of forced to drop in that big and pick and rolls and stuff like that. But once it's nut cutting time, you kind of go to your lineup with Harkless or whoever you feel is your power precious, whoever the hell is the guy that you're going with, and you're just kind of switching those actions.
Yeah, I think the game plan from last year is basically what we're going to see, especially if Meyers Leonard is sliding into the starting lineup. It's going to be a lot of drop, which, again, this is why the Avery Bradley signing is a big one for Miami. Just a guy that can hound point guards in particular. So I think if you have Bradley and he stays healthy, then that shores that up a little bit. And now, the Heat did a good job of preventing rim attempts last year. It was still a bit of a mess when teams were able to get into the rim, but I think you have some improvement there in which the attempts are lower. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now either. I think they were 10th in terms of rim rate allowed.
No, they were in the top 3, I think, or the top 5 in fewest field goal attempts at the rim.
They were right up there.
Yeah, and then number 2 in like highest percentage at the rim.
It was just once they went to the rim, they basically converted a lot.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that could probably improve even more, just because, Avery Bradley is fantastic navigating screens, getting to a drip ball handler's airspace, just making things uncomfortable, forcing them into those mid-range looks. Bradley helps quite a bit there, and the drop is a more conservative scheme, simple to apply those principles during the regular season, which helps with some of the new guys. Even though they added a lot of vets, I don't think there's going to be a super big learning curve there. But you also want to save Bam a little bit. If he's going to be switching out in the postseason, and boy does he switch out in the postseason. You want to make sure that he's ready for that. You don't want to put too much on his plate during the regular season. I would imagine that he's going to have even more on-ball responsibility this year. This is going to be a big year for his jumper, I feel like. Yeah. He's been flashing it for a couple of years now. This probably needs to be the year that he really commits to taking more jumpers, and maybe we see him spot out to the corners a little more this year.
Maybe he takes 2 or 3 threes a game.
Yeah, like he has the feel for it. He has the touch for it.
I don't know, man. That little 10-footer, I don't feel good about it. I don't, and I think he's got to at least get the 15-footer before he's going to be comfortable taking. He's just, he's just a guy who's been always kind of on the conservative end for his career. The last year, not the year before last, Dwayne's last season, Hassan's last season here, he was a guy that I think we saw the ball skill and everything, and just really was conservative about it, wouldn't really kind of take charge. And even this season, he showed it in flashes, but we've been pounding the table for him to kind of go at guys, to take more charge offensively, to be more of a face-up guy, to kind of go at the rim more, not just be a guy rolling in terms of his scoring opportunities. And at times we saw it, Game 6 against the Celtics, and I think that second half in Game 6 against the Lakers, we saw a lot of that. Dude very quietly ripped the Lakers apart in the second half of Game 6 after that awful first half.
Yeah.
Very quietly. Like, let's be honest. I mean, the game was over. Bam was completely dominating the second. Didn't he finish with like 30, 11, and 6 or something? It was something crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, so
We need to see more of that. And then I think that's also going to be something that the Heat might. I don't know. This is something that I was thinking about earlier today because obviously, like, we saw like the contracts that Donovan Mitchell got, De'Aaron Fox. Like, the upside of his contract is going to be $195 million if he makes All NBA. And you got to imagine Bam already has that in his head. Like, hey, if I make All NBA this season, I'm going to be making close to $40 million per year compared to $33 million per year on his new deal. So I have to imagine Bam's going to be going all out next year, trying to make that All NBA team.
So, Nekias, you want to guess what Bam shot from 3 to 10 feet last year?
3 to 10 feet. Let me say like 38%.
45.
45%.
A lot better than I thought. He shot 40% from 12 to 16, from 10 to 16. Better than I thought. And I think if he can kind of get those attempts up and hold those percentages, I think that's a win for the franchise.
It is.
He's going to probably have a similar year to what Pascal had last year, is what I'm thinking.
Oh, Brian, don't. Brian, you're talking my love language.
You've done it now.
Like 22
talking
game.
my love
to me,
language.
that makes sense. I think he can have a 22 per game year.
I mean, he was arguably better than Pascal last season. I mean,
in the playoffs, he was. For sure.
I don't think he'll have that kind of offensive season. I don't think Bam has that much in the bag.
He has a lot to gain if he can increase his shot percentage, I guess.
As someone who watched a disproportionate amount of Raptor games last season, Pascal was crossing dudes over the 3-point line and pulling up.
Yeah,
Bam's not gonna have that in his bag.
He doesn't have that kind of shape with the handle. He's more powerful than Pascal is.
Yeah.
Which is why I think there's the difference in the free throw rate. Once Bam puts his head down, combined with the quickness that he has, he can pretty much get to the line whenever he wants to. Like that was the thing while he was playing behind Hassan. It was one of those hidden nuggets you saw when he was getting those bench minutes. Like, hey, he's averaging such and such free throws per 100 or whatever. Like he gets to the line. Like he already has some of those tricks with the pump fake, with the rip throughs. So he has those. It's really just about aggression with him. Like I'm really worried about him being able to cross over guys. He can do that. Like he does have some shake in his game. We see that when he goes coast to coast. But it's more about just the aggression. Like go to the rim more. You know, you have the strength, you have the leaping ability. You get to the free throw line. Like he's a good free throw shooter for a big. I mean, I think that's where the growth is. Just being more comfortable taking charge.
The next thing I want to see with him, Nekias, is, you know, we're looking at kind of how teams are defending him and that handoff in particular. And I think now what we want to see is, you know, if they're switching that handoff, right? So, you know, if they're putting Duncan's man, you know, if they're putting a bigger guy on Duncan and to have him switch off to Bam, I think Bam has to start taking more charge of attacking that smaller matchup. Mm-hmm. You know, even if it's up top at the 3-point line, I think he's strong enough to kind of put his head down, like you're saying, kind of attack the rim. I obviously he doesn't have a LeBron handle or anything, but I think it's tight enough that, and he's a good enough passer, especially off the dribble. I mean, you saw in that Celtics series that wraparound pass as he's taking Tice off the dribble to cut Jimmy Butler cutting, right? And they're gonna have options in the corners, and Tyler and Duncan's always relocating. So if they're running that handoff and then Bam's taking it to the rim, you know Duncan's not standing there. Duncan's starting to the corner. You know, guys are off ball screening. So to me, that's other than the jumper, that's the next kind of step I want him to take, because it's not only going to help himself, it's going to help Duncan a lot.
Yeah, you're right on the money. This is something that I've tweeted about, something that I've written about when it comes to Bam. Like he was sneakily bad on post-ups against guards last year, which is it's just a thing that can't happen. Like the touch is too good. He's too strong. He's too athletic. He's too big. He has too much.
Too smart.
He's too smart. Yeah, like that's just. And that's low-hanging fruit from him, which is encouraging for the Heat. Like as we saw in the Boston series, like if he can do that in high-stakes games, then surely he can do that against like the Kings in January. You know, if he can just do that more consistently, the fact that he's flashed that much stuff, he is as hungry as a dude as he is. I think it's encouraging. There's reason to project that he will get there eventually. 16
points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, one steal, 1 block. I mean, those are just accounting stats, but I mean that's, you know, 30-year guy. I mean, I don't know if that was a capital L leap. He certainly did make a leap. The free throw rate going to about 5 free throws from 3 is huge too. I've talked about that a lot with guys like DeMar, for example. Like, you know, you look at the free throw numbers and how they go up and how that's really indicative of kind of, you know, those leaps to stardom, right? Like, you know, the more you get to the rim and the more you're getting respect from the officials, and kind of between him and Butler getting teams in the bonus sooner, it's going to help their defense, which, you know, struggled in the regular season last year. Before we go into Nekias, I got to ask, you know, looking at the landscape of the Eastern Conference, obviously Milwaukee got better. You know, Drew Holiday, just as we said earlier, really raises the roof on their upside. I think that the people that are being critical of Milwaukee's offseason, I understand it, but also we have to understand how good Drew Holiday is and how late in games and games that mattered, Eric Bledsoe was an offensive minus a lot of the time, and I think allows for that massive overhelping on Giannis. And I think if you have a guy like Drew, who's not, you know, he's not a JJ Redick Duncan type shooter, right? But the dude is solid enough as a spot up guy, you know, who's going to be wide open all the time. Plus, you know, there are other additions that are smaller, but, you know, I think when you have the two-time MVP and Defensive Player of the Year, you're keeping Brook Lopez, you're keeping Chris Middleton, that's your guy. Adding a guy like Drew Holiday, I think that it's a little foolish. I think sometimes basketball Twitter tries to overthink stuff. I mean, they added arguably their third best player, second best player. I mean, depends. I mean, I know you don't feel that way, but, you know, some may argue so.
They could still use more shooting, especially if Korver's not back.
Everybody can use more shooting. The Nets, obviously, you know, with KD, Kyrie, you know, Raptors going to take a step back. Serge Ibaka, you know, signing with the Clippers.
Boston too. Boston without Gordon Hayward.
Boston without Gordy. They got Tristan Thompson, who's, you know, gonna help it. And now they have a logjam at center between Tice and Thompson and Time Lord and the other kid who was dancing on the sideline, Robert Williams. So annoying. God. Dude, you're down in the series. Why are you dancing? I'm an old man now.
Let the young man cook, man.
I know, man. I was just, I don't know. You Nekias, you know, I mean, you see me in the group chat. I became a different person that run.
Yes, you did.
I changed. But yeah, I mean, just looking at the landscape of the East, how do you feel? Because I think at least, you know, I think they're certainly, I think, comfortably the third best team, depending on how you feel about Boston. And if Jason Tatum can take another leap, I think they're comfortably top 4 at this point.
Yeah, I would definitely say they're top 4. I would probably say third. I would say Milwaukee's should be the favorite right now. I still really like Boston. I would say Miami's third. I just can't get there with Brooklyn right now. I just don't trust the defense at all. And they haven't done a lot to really answer those questions. Like,
they added shooting with Shamet, but I don't think they really added any defensive weapons. I mean, they were going after Ibaka. They didn't get him. Who did they end up?
I thought DJ was
Did they sign
underrated
anybody with the
last year.
mid-level yet? I don't know if they have yet.
Surge?
Well, they didn't get him, so I'm trying
No,
to
they-
say if they got anybody with the mid-level at this
Oh, no. They haven't done anything with the mid-level
So
yet.
they still
But
could probably get somebody else.
I mean, if Durant is any kind of facsimile of a help defender that he was in Golden State, I think that's going to erase a lot of issues.
I mean,
He
I've
was
heard a
just
lot of people like Kevin
outrageous.
O'Connor saying like he'll probably still be a great offensive player, but his defense might take a hit just because of the Achilles injury.
I mean, he won't have the spring, but I mean that length doesn't go away.
the length doesn't go away. Like, there's going to be a lot of strain on KD as a help defender that's coming off of the injury. We also have to talk about how is KD going to feel about playing a lot of 4? Like, that's always been his best position, but I'm not sure if that's something that he wants to do. He may want a traditional 4 just so he can kind of hide on the weaker perimeter guy and then provide the help as opposed to defending 4s. So
Yeah.
that
Felicia's
is
a
still
guy.
a question.
That I would really like there.
Who?
Felicia?
I don't think he doesn't help their defense though.
I know, but I mean, it kind of slides KD into maybe a more conservative role for him. And I think I agree with you on the defense. I just think at times it can be so overwhelming offensively, especially late in game, when those guys get in their bag. And I think, like I said, I think people were kind of hard on DJ last year. I thought he had an underrated year, especially toward the end. I really thought he cleaned a lot up.
Yeah, he was fine. He's also
They can flip
he's
Jared
also-
Allen for stuff.
They're gonna have to make a trade. It doesn't have to be for Harden, but they're gonna make a trade.
Yeah, like they need a 4 bad. Like maybe it's Dinwiddie plus something to try to get Aaron Gordon in there. Like that makes some sense. But then again, I mean, they just drafted Cole Anthony, so I don't know how much they want to give, how much playing time they want to give to like the Cole Anthony, Markelle Fultz thing. I don't know.
Yeah, probably not.
But they need a 4. I can't get there on Brooklyn. I need to see how Nash does as the coach there. I mean, he does have a very strong staff behind him.
I'm surprised that you put Boston over Miami. To be honest with you, I thought Brooklyn would have been the team that you slaughtered. I mean, Miami just.
I mean,
beat
they
Boston.
were pretty close in the regular season last year, so I
But
could
they
see.
lost Hayward.
Yeah, I could
really
see.
unlocked.
I could see Miami taking it, but they're not going to have like a big lead on standings. I don't think, especially now with
I don't see why Boston should be favored over Miami in any sense. I mean, unless you really believe that Tatum's going to take another leap to be a top 8 guy.
Like
Unless that's what you're banking on.
Miami has more players to make more leaps than Boston does, I think.
I mean, there's still room to go. There's still more room to grow with Jason Tatum. There's still room to grow with Jaylen Brown. For the way that Kemba was picked on defensively in the postseason, I think he was fine through the first 2 rounds. Miami just kind of killed him. He was playing through some injuries there, and he's still a dynamic pick and roll guy. I'm not sure they're going to miss Hayward too much. I like their free agent signings. I think that's probably why I'm higher on Boston than most. Like Tristan Thompson's going to be huge for them. He's a guy that can close out games in a way that Daniel Tice probably couldn't because Daniel Tice.
Dave Dufour said Daniel Tice is a Hall of Famer. I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, Daniel Tice is a good pick. He's a good pick and roll defender, but he's not a guy that can really navigate space. Tristan Thompson can do that, and Tristan Thompson is just flat out better offensively. I feel like slightly better passer, better screener, even though Daniel Tice is a good screen and stealer himself. I think he helps a lot. And adding Jeff Teague, the fact that he's not going to be starting.
Don't even defend Jeff Teague.
Jeff Teague is average. Boston didn't have a table setter on their bench. Like Brad Wanamaker was fine, but he's not a point guard. He's more of a combo guy, not a good passer. He's a play finisher, not a play creator. Jeff Teague can competently run a pick and roll for you. And like he can run a pick and roll and he can hit spot up shots. And he can get to the rim still. Just having adequacy at the point guard spot and not having Marcus Smart have to do everything, which he does not mind doing, and that can kind of get Boston into trouble sometimes. Just having a calming presence like Jeff Teague, I think that helps. Like the criticism with Jeff Teague is that, I mean, he's average. And if he's your starting point guard, then there's not really room for upside. Like he's not going to kill you. He's not going to help you too much. If Jeff Teague is your 6th or your 7th man, that's a good NBA player. And Boston
He's another guy
someone...
to pick on and pick and roll when it matters. That's why I not only do I see a guy that commits a lot of turnovers and that isn't the best decision maker, I see him as a guy that's going to get picked on in the same ways that Kemba did. I think if anything, you know, a kind of more defensive oriented point guard off the bench. But and I understand what you're saying about kind of somebody to help their offense off the bench, but
yeah, like I don't think he's going to close too many games for you. I mean, he's a guy that's going to help you get to that point. Like I still think their final lineup is probably going to be Kemba, Smart, Tatum Brown, and then one of the bigs. If it's Tice, if he has it rolling, Tristan Thompson, I mean, they can still switch quite a bit. Boston still did a pretty solid job overall in hiding Kemba. Like he, again, like through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, I think he was fine. And just in general,
I disagree with that. I thought that Toronto did an excellent job of hunting him. I thought Fred and Kyle in particular, even though Fred didn't have a good series, you know, just missing a lot of jumpers. I thought that, especially late in games, Lowry did a great job of looking for who Kemba was guarding and having them screen. And I thought that they adequately attacked him. And I thought that the reason why that was an awful matchup for Toronto in a lot of ways. And I thought the only reason that got to 7 games was because, you know, Toronto's grittiness, and we know that, you know, championship pedigree and all that. But the idea of, you know, they had an easy matchup to pick on every time down the floor late, and they did so with ferocity.
I love how we're doing an NBA season preview when all it really matters is that's Heat in 5.
Heat in 5, baby!